Chapter 25, Part 5 of Volume 3 of A Popular History of France from the Earliest Times. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Kate Mackenzie. Volume 3 of A Popular History of France from the Earliest Times by François Guizot. Translated by Robert Black. Chapter 25. Louis XI, 1461 to 1483, Part 5. Whilst Duke Charles was thus abandoning himself to the just when he was coming to place himself in his enemy's hands. Far, however, from losing his head, Louis displayed in this perilous trial all the penetration, activity, and shrewdness of his mind, together with all the suppleness of his character. He sent by his own servants questions, offers, and promises to all the duke's servants from whom he could hope for any help or any good advice. 15,000 golden crowns, with which he had provided himself at starting, were given by him to be distributed amongst the household of the Duke of Burgundy, a liberality which was perhaps useless, since it is said that he to whom he had entrusted the sum kept a good portion of it for himself. The king passed 2 days in this state of gloomy expectancy as to what was in preparation against him. On the 11th of October, Duke Charles, having cooled down a little, assembled his council. The sitting lasted all the day and part of the night. Louis had sent to make an offer to swear a peace, such as, at the moment of his arrival, had been proposed to him, without any reservation or difficulty on his part. He engaged to join the duke in making war upon the Liegese and chastising them for their rebellion. He would leave as hostages his nearest relatives and his most intimate advisers. At the beginning of the council his proposals were not even listened to. There was no talk but of keeping the king a prisoner and sending after his brother, the Prince Charles, with whom the entire government of the kingdom should be arranged. The messenger had orders to be in readiness to start at once. His horse was in the courtyard, he was only waiting for the letters which the duke was writing to Brittany. The chancellor of Burgundy and some of the wiser councillors besought the duke to reflect. The king had come to Peronne on the faith of his safe conduct. It would be an eternal dishonour for the house of Burgundy if he broke his word to his sovereign lord; and the conditions which the king was prepared to grant would put an end, with advantage to Burgundy, to serious and difficult business. The duke gave heed to these honest and prudent counsels. The news from Liege turned out to be less serious than the first rumours had represented. The bishop and Sire d'Humbercourt had been set at liberty. Charles retired to his chamber, and there, without thinking of undressing, he walked to and fro with long strides, threw himself upon his bed, got up again, and soliloquized out loud, addressing himself occasionally to Commynes, who lay close by him. Towards morning, though he still showed signs of irritation, his language was less threatening. "He has promised me," said he, "to come with me to reinstate the Bishop of Liege, who is my brother-in-law, and a relation of his also. He shall certainly come. I shall not scruple to hold him to his word that he gave me." And he at once sent Sire de Crequi, de Charny, and de la Roche to tell the king that he was about to come and swear peace with him. Commynes had only just time to tell Louis in what frame of mind the duke was, and in what danger he would place himself if he hesitated either to swear peace or to march against the Liegese. As soon as it was broad day, the duke entered the apartment of the castle where the king was a prisoner. His look was courteous, but his voice trembled with choler. His words were short and bitter. His manner was threatening. A little troubled at his aspect, Louis said, "Brother, I am safe, am I not, in your house and your country?" "Yes, sir," answered the duke. "So safe that if I saw an arrow from a bow coming towards you, I would throw myself in the way to protect you. But will you not be pleased to swear the treaty just as it is written?" "Yes," said the king, "and I thank you for your good will." "And will you not be pleased to come with me to Liege, to help me punish the treason committed against me by these Liegese, all through you and your journey hither?" "The bishop is your near relative of the house of Bourbon." "Yes, pardieu," replied Louis, "and I am much astounded at their wickedness. But begin we by swearing this treaty, and then I will start, with as many or as few of my people as you please." Forthwith was taken out from the king's boxes the wood of the so called true cross, which was named the cross of Saint Lo, because it had been preserved in the church of Saint Lo at Angers. It was supposed to have formerly belonged to Charlemagne, and it was the relic which Louis regarded as the most sacred. The treaty was immediately signed, without any change being made in that of Conflans. The Duke of Burgundy merely engaged to use his influence with Prince Charles of France to induce him to be content with Brie and Champagne as appanage. The storm was weathered, and Louis almost rejoiced at seeing himself called upon to chastise in person the Liegese, who had made him commit such a mistake and run such a risk. Next day the two princes set out together, Charles with his army, and Louis with his modest train increased by 300 men at arms whom he had sent for from France. On the 27th of October they arrived before Liege. Since Duke Charles's late victories, the city had no longer any ramparts or ditches; nothing seemed easier than to get into it; but the besieged could not persuade themselves that Louis was sincerely allied with the Duke of Burgundy, and they made a sortie shouting, "Hurrah for the king! Hurrah for France!" Great was their surprise when they saw Louis advancing in person, wearing in his hat the cross of St. Andrew of Burgundy, and shouting hurrah for Burgundy. Some even amongst the French who surrounded the king were shocked; they could not reconcile themselves to so little pride and such brazen falsehood. Louis took no heed of their temper, and never ceased to repeat, "When pride rides before, shame and hurt follow close after." The surprise of the Liegese was transformed into indignation. They made a more energetic and a longer resistance than had been expected. The besiegers, confident in their strength, kept careless watch, and the sorties of the besieged became more numerous. One night Charles received notice that his men had just been attacked in a suburb which they had held, and were flying. He mounted his horse, gave orders not to awake the king, repaired by himself to the place where the fight was, put everything to rights, and came back and told the whole affair to Louis, who exhibited a great joy. Another time, one dark and rainy night, there was an alarm, about midnight, of a general attack upon the whole Burgundian camp. The duke was soon up, and a moment afterwards the king arrived. There was great disorder. "The Liegese sallied by this gate," said some. "No," said others, "it was by that gate." There was nothing known for certain, and there were no orders given. Charles was impetuous and brave, but he was easily disconcerted, and his servants were somewhat vexed not to see him putting a better countenance on things before the king. Louis, on the other hand, was cool and calm, giving commands firmly, and ready to assume responsibility wherever he happened to be. "Take what men you have," said he to the constable St. Point, who was at his side, "and go in this direction. If they are really coming upon us, they will pass that way." It was discovered to be a false alarm. 2 days afterwards there was a more serious affair. The inhabitants of a canton which was close to the city, and was called Franchemont, resolved to make a desperate effort, and go and fall suddenly upon the very spot where the two princes were quartered. One night, about 10 P.M., 600 men sallied out by one of the breaches, all men of stout hearts and well armed. The duke's quarters were first attacked. Only 12 archers were on guard below, and they were playing at dice. Charles was in bed. Commynes put on him as quickly as possible his breastplate and helmet, and they went downstairs. The archers were with great difficulty defending the doorway, but help arrived and the danger was over. The quarters of King Louis had also been attacked, but at the first sound the Scottish archers had hurried up, surrounded their master, and repulsed the attack, without caring whether their arrows killed Liegese or such Burgundians as had come up with assistance. The gallant fellows from Franchemont fell almost to a man. The duke and his principal captains held a council the next day, and the duke was for delivering the assault. The king was not present at this council, and when he was informed of the resolution taken, he was not in favour of an assault. "You see," said he, "the courage of these people. You know how murderous and uncertain is street fighting. You will lose many brave men to no purpose. Wait 2 or 3 days, and the Liegese will infallibly come to terms." Nearly all the Burgundian captains sided with the king. The duke got angry. "He wishes to spare the Liegese," said he. "What danger is there in this assault? There are no walls. They can't put a single gun in position. I will certainly not give up the assault. If the king is afraid, let him get gone to Namur." Such an insult shocked even the Burgundians. Louis was informed of it, but said nothing. Next day, the 30th of October, 1468, the assault was ordered, and the duke marched at the head of his troops. Up came the king, but "Bide," said Charles, "put not yourself uselessly in danger. I will send you word when it is time." "Lead on, brother," replied Louis; "you are the most fortunate prince alive. I will follow you." And he continued marching with him; but the assault was unnecessary. Discouragement had taken possession of the Liegese, the bravest of whom had fallen. It was Sunday, and the people who remained were not expecting an attack. The cloth was laid in every house, and all were preparing for dinner. The Burgundians moved forward through the empty streets, and Louis marched quietly along, surrounded by his own escort, and shouting, "Hurrah for Burgundy!" The duke turned back to meet him, and they went together to give thanks to God in the cathedral of St. Lambert. It was the only church which had escaped from the fury and the pillaging of the Burgundians. By midday there was nothing left to take in the houses or in the churches. Louis loaded Duke Charles with felicitations and commendations. He knew how to turn them in a fashion so courteous and amiable that the duke was charmed and softened. The next day, as they were talking together, "Brother," said the king to the duke, "if you have still need of my help, do not spare me; but if you have nothing more for me to do, it would be well for me to go back to Paris, to make public in my court of parliament the arrangement we have come to together; otherwise it would run a risk of becoming of no avail; you know that such is the custom of France. Next summer we must meet again; you will come into your duchy of Burgundy, and I will go and pay you a visit, and we will pass a week joyously together in making good cheer." Charles made no answer, and sent for the treaty lately concluded between them at Peronne, leaving it to the king's choice to confirm or to renounce it, and excusing himself in covert terms for having thus constrained him and brought him away. The king made a show of being satisfied with the treaty, and on the 2d of November, 1468, the day but one after the capture of Liege, set out for France. The duke bore him company to within half a league of the city. As they were taking leave of one another, the king said to him, "If, peradventure, my brother Charles, who is in Brittany, should be discontented with the assignment I make for him for love of you, what would you have me do?" "If he do not please to take it," answered the duke, "but would have you satisfy him, I leave it to you two." Louis desired no more. He returned home free and confident in himself, after having passed the most trying 3 weeks of his life. But Louis XI's deliverance after his quasi captivity at Peronne, and the new treaty he had concluded with Duke Charles, were and could be only a temporary break in the struggle between these two princes, destined as they were, both by character and position, to irremediable incompatibility. They were too powerful and too different to live at peace when they were such close neighbours, and when their relations were so complicated. We find in the chronicle of Georges Chastelain, a Flemish burgher, and a servant on familiar terms with Duke Charles, as he had been with his father, Duke Philip, a judicious picture of this incompatibility and the causes of it. "There had been," he says, "at all times a rancour between these two princes, and, whatever pacification might have been effected to day, everything returned tomorrow to the old condition, and no real love could be established. They suffered from incompatibility of temperament and perpetual discordance of will, and the more they advanced in years, the deeper they plunged into a state of serious difference and hopeless bitterness. The king was a man of subtlety and full of fence. He knew how to recoil for a better spring, how to affect humility and gentleness in his deep designs, how to yield and to give up in order to receive double, and how to bear and tolerate for a time his own grievances, in hopes of being able at last to have his revenge. He was, therefore, very much to be feared for his practical knowledge, showing the greatest skill and penetration in the world. Duke Charles was to be feared for his great courage, which he evinced and displayed in his actions, making no account of king or emperor. Thus, whilst the king had great sense and great ability, which he used with dissimulation and suppleness in order to succeed in his views, the duke, on his side, had a great sense of another sort and to another purpose, which he displayed by a public ostentation of his pride without any fear of putting himself in a false position. Between 1468 and 1477, from the incident at Peronne to the death of Charles at the siege of Nancy, the history of the two princes was nothing but one constant alternation between ruptures and readjustments, hostilities and truces, wherein both were constantly changing their posture, their language, and their allies. It was, at one time, the affairs of the Duke of Brittany, or those of Prince Charles of France, become Duke of Guienne; at another, it was the relations with the different claimants to the throne of England, or the fate of the towns, in Picardy, handed over to the Duke of Burgundy by the treaties of Conflans Peronne, which served as a ground or pretext for the frequent recurrences of war. In 1471, St. Quentin opened its gates to Count Louis of St. Poi, constable of France, and Duke Charles complained with threats about it to the Count of Dampmartin, who was in command, on that frontier, of Louis XI's army, and had a good understanding with the constable. Dampmartin, one of the bravest men of his time, says Duclos, in the Histoire de Louis XI, in the Heure complète of Duclos, tract 2, page 429, sincere and faithful, a warm friend and an implacable foe, at once replied to the duke, "Most high and puissant prince, I suppose your letters to have been dictated by your council and highest clerics, who are folks better at letter making than I am, for I have not lived by quill driving. If I write you matter that displeases you, and you have a desire to revenge yourself upon me, you shall find me so near to your army, that you will know how little fear I have of you. Be assured that if it be your will to go on long making war upon the king, it will at last be found out by all the world that as a soldier you have mistaken your calling." The next year, 1472, war broke out. Duke Charles went and laid siege to Beauvais, and on the 27th of June delivered the first assault. The inhabitants were at this moment left almost alone to defend their town. A young girl of 18, Joan Fourquet, whom a burgher's wife of Beauvais, Madame Lesne, her mother by adoption, had bred up in the history, still so recent, of Joan of Arc, threw herself into the midst of the throng, holding up her little axe, hachette, before the image of Sainte Incordesme, patroness of the town, and crying, "O glorious Virgin, come to my aid! To arms! To arms!" The assault was repulsed. Reinforcements came up from Noyon, Amiens, and Paris, under the orders of the Marshal de Rohan, and the mayor of Beauvais presented Joan to him. "Sir," said the young girl to him, "you have everywhere been victor, and you will be so with us." On the 9th of July, the Duke of Burgundy delivered a second assault, which lasted 4 hours. Some Burgundians had escaladed a part of the ramparts. Joan Hachette arrived there just as one of them was planting his flag on the spot. She pushed him over the side into the ditch, and went down in pursuit of him. The man fell on one knee. Joan struck him down, took possession of the flag, and mounted up to the ramparts again, crying, "Victory!" The same cry resounded at all points of the wall. The assault was everywhere repulsed. The vexation of Charles was great. The day before he had been almost alone in advocating the assault. In the evening, as he lay on his camp bed, according to his custom, he had asked several of his people whether they thought the townsmen were prepared for it. "Yes, certainly," said the answer; "there are a great number of them." "You will not find a soul there to morrow," said Charles with a sneer. He remained for 12 days longer before the place, looking for a better chance. but on the 12th of July he decided upon raising the siege, and took the road to Normandy. Some days before attacking Beauvais he had taken, not without difficulty, Nesle in the Vermandois. "There it was," said Commynes, "that he first committed a horrible and wicked deed of war, which had never been his wont; this was burning everything everywhere. Those who were taken alive were hanged; a pretty large number had their hands cut off. It mislikes me to speak of such cruelty, but I was on the spot, and must needs say something about it." Commynes undoubtedly said something about it to Charles himself, who answered, "It is the fruit borne by the tree of war. It would have been the fate of Beauvais if I could have taken the town." CHAPTER XXVI.